It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, August 29th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is excited. I'm not sure if it's the right word, but intrigued by our conversation on Rasmus Ristolainen today.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with the brilliant Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. That's where you'll keep up to date on all our episodes and Flyers news. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. On today's show, we've got a couple of RFA signings to talk about with Wade Allison and Linus Hogberg. We're going to do a deep dive on Rasmus Ristolainen and then have our Nemesis of the week. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you listen to podcasts. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube. So subscribe and give us a thumbs up over there. So once again, Russ, we are correct in our analysis. Hayden Hodgson is the cheese that stands alone, I guess.
Yeah, poor guy.
RFA summer.
He has his hand out. He's waiting for that last little bit.
Because the Flyers officially signed Wade Allison and Linus Hogberg. Wade Allison got a 2-year, two-way, one-way deal. The NHL salary is $785K. And, we have been talking about what a Wade Allison contract might look like because of his injury history. So to see him get a 2-year deal with the second year being a one-way deal, is the Flyers really betting on him in a way?
It is. I mean, I'm going to say this as delicately as I can. Chuck Fletcher hands out these kind of contracts like they're candy. Like he just does. I still would have only given him a 1 year. Anytime I say 2 years is too many, they say, well, the second year is only a one-way and it's only yeah, but you're still committed to him. And at this point, he really has to prove to me he could play like 60 NHL games. If he can't, if he wants to be a career AHLer, fine. I'll sign him every year for the AHL after that. But to give him a 2-year deal now makes no sense. I get it. Everybody's going to say that, well, it's just a one-way after the 1 year. Oh, okay, fine. But it's still betting on him, like you said.
Yeah, and it takes up a roster spot, right?
Yes.
Where you have to go through a lot more hoops if you want to waive him, which is fine. And maybe they think, oh, if we have to waive him, we'll waive him. We don't care. But I do think that it is a little bit risky with Wade Allison. And, he only played one game with the Flyers this past season. He had 28 games in Lehigh, where he had 10 goals and 7 assists. So it wasn't like he was extremely prolific at the AHL level. He did fine, but it wasn't anything to write home about. And so I do think that this is an incredible risk. Now, the reward could be extremely high because I do think he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, me too.
He could surprise us, but it's just like the chance of him staying healthy just seems so unlikely.
Yeah, the thing is, they have this theory that the team does that, hey, he fits this, either third line or fourth line role perfectly, right, as an NHLer. And when you see him play one game there, he can. But we don't know if he can handle the rigors of a season. And that's the problem. And a Tortorella season is going to be now harder for him than any coach he's ever had previously. So when you play for Torts, it's going to take more of a toll on you, especially if you're playing with the puck in your end a lot. So I don't know how Wade Allison's going to be able to handle this. I hope he can. I've always said that. But I wouldn't have given him 2 years because it's like, again, it's one of those things where, like you said, it does eventually take up a roster spot. And yeah, you can just simply waive him, sure. But again, like you said, there does become a point when things are tight and everything else, and you start to do that, and it causes a little havoc. And maybe just him having that roster spot means you're not inviting somebody else into camp next year, and you're going to hope again that Wade Allison can do something, even if he's just on an AHL deal, because you could still sign him to an NHL deal after that. So that hope is still there for 2 more years. That's what it tells me. And to me, I would only have the hope there for 1 more year. Like this year, he would have to prove it to me completely.
Yeah, and again, certainly hope he comes through and he has a great season, because I love the kid since
He's a
the
great
day
guy.
he was drafted. So best wishes to him for this upcoming season. Linus Hogberg, defenseman, love that they gave him a deal. 2-way contract is exactly right. And I do think this is also kind of make it or break it year for Hogberg as well. But I think his development has been going pretty smoothly. I don't think, he's exceeded expectations by any stretch, but I
He's
do
been
think
like a slow arc.
Yeah, he's made progress year to year. He had 8 assists with the Phantoms this past season. He had 5 games with the Flyers, 2 assists in that time. And I think he acquitted himself pretty well in those 5 games and showed that he could hang at the NHL level to a certain degree.
Yeah, he's a good skater, a good puck transporter. He could be a depth guy. Could he fill in on the third pairing for a couple weeks? Yeah. And so you need those kinds of guys. Could he do better than that? He might. He's been doing better than I thought he would, I think, to this point. I was always kind of like 50-50 that, whether he could make it or not. It's interesting, too, because, for a website called Full Press, I just did a Flyers under 25, and I had to just sort of scratch him off at the last minute because I wanted to talk about guys who could have the most impact on the Flyers that are under 25, and he just misses out. Like, it's always like that. Like, even we could tell people here, like, when he was unsigned, we were thinking about profiling him, and we were like, oh, wait, he's still unsigned, because even to the Flyers, he's just this close, and they're not sure. And so we had to sort of act accordingly, too. Now, at some point, we probably will profile him, because I think a little bit into the season, he'll be a fun player to watch, because I like watching guys, even if it's at a slow pace, that do develop and surprise you.
Yeah, I really think he's going to have a banger of a year in Lehigh Valley and get a call up at some point.
Yeah, opportunities there.
I do. I just think he's on the right track. All right. Rasmus Ristolainen. Man, he has been such a controversial figure in Flyers land. And I think, it started with the deal and giving up a first round draft pick and Robert Haig. We weren't really sorry to see Robert Haig go. It just seemed like overall the haul.
But we knew he could play. He could play, Robert Haig.
Yeah. So just a solid, low pairing defensive defenseman.
Correct.
Nothing more, nothing less. But I think we were just kind of overwhelmed by the package to get a guy like Risto, who has been just by the numbers not great for most of his career.
So with Risto, I think there's one thing that's always at play. The one thing that's always at play is he was a high draft pick. So then all of a sudden in some people's minds, they elevate him to a certain level because of that. Then after that, it's, well, he's supposed to be an offensive defenseman. Well, we're way past that now. We should be, but not everybody is. Buffalo fans aren't. When they talk about Ristolainen, they still look at him as a disappointment because he doesn't produce offensively. And I think some Flyers fans see that he has a great shot, but he also takes 10 minutes to load it. So it's like, you can't really play him on the power play because of that. He's good at moving around the puck, but he's, his shot just isn't fast enough as far as the release. So I think when you look at those two factors, then it becomes what is he good at? Well, he's physical. And so the Flyers will always talk about the fact that he's physical. And fans seem to don't want to pay for that. You know what I mean? It's just, but you need that in the league. I think we're seeing it all over. And so as an example, I always, or will say even on this show, take Risto out of there. You got your money back. What are you doing for a physical presence on the blue line? You have to have one. And there is nobody else on the Flyers that's going to fill that role. Now, Nick Seeler can do it for 9 minutes a game. if you really want to do that. But then where would you get that? And how much cheaper could you get it at? I think that's what you have to look at, is the sort of the replacement value here, not necessarily even the player at this point.
I think there's some fair points in there. I do think there is a possibility to get the physicality with a little bit better offensive play and a little bit better defensive play. Now, would they have had to pay the same price? Sure, but I would rather have, a physical defenseman who can actually play defense a little bit better.
Okay. There's not a ton of those guys out there.
No, there are not. And I also, David Jiricek would have been a great draft pick.
Yes.
Along those lines.
Listen, I'm not going to argue with you on that one. And he did great in the second part of the World Juniors too. He really looked good. I get it.
He did. All right, we're going to continue talking about Rasmus Ristolainen coming up next. But first, an important message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Are you one of those people that thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that could happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everybody around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI.
All right, getting back to our deep dive on Rasmus Ristolainen. I think, in addition to the deal to get him here, the re-signing of Ristolainen at a 5-year, $5.1 million cap hit just was, I think, really an affront to a lot of Flyers fans and confusing to a lot of people. Now, is that sort of your general right price for a second pairing defenseman? Yes. I absolutely think that's kind of where you're going to land typically in the NHL. The problem is that what had he done at that point to earn that deal, which was nowhere near enough, nor did he earn it after the deal was made. I just don't think his play got better at any point in this season.
It didn't get better. I think up to that point, it was pretty good, though. I think it was better than what some detractors were willing to say. So I see what the Flyers were seeing. Plus, there was an air of desperation around the organization that probably still exists, but not as bad. So there was that. We have to go back and get in that mindset of what was going on with the front office. And then certainly there was that, especially with Ryan Ellis out. It's like, we're going to lose another one. And then if you're the GM, you do sort of have to cover your tracks because you've given up a lot of assets, like you pointed out. So all those things are like a perfect storm to get this guy signed. But now there's a new coach, John Tortorella. And so back when he used to coach the Rangers, I kind of wonder if you could make Ristolainen sort of in the same role. And of course, he'll be second pairing, not a top pairing. Same kind of role as Dan Girardi was. Like, Dan Girardi was never this super talented defenseman, but John Tortorella is the best thing that ever happened to Dan Girardi. He became a supreme shot blocker. He was really good getting the puck away around the net. He was physical, and he actually got a few more points than you would expect. And Risto could always put up some points because he is a very good passer and does have a good first pass. And so I think you could make him sort of into that Dan Girardi role as a second pairing guy and sort of have him play the same way. I think if you do that, I think you'll get the most out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying there, and I do think that potential is there with Torts. I think with the system he'll put in place, I think he'll force Risto to have a little bit more defensive responsibility than he did. I think he was a little bit more free-for-all this past season, and you're right, he is that physical guy. Obviously, he led the team with hits in 230 hits. That's a lot. 125 block shots. So he is good for that. And I will give him that. And I do think, one of the things we talked about last off season with him was that in Buffalo, he was a first pairing defenseman that he just should not have been. And so getting a second pairing role with a little bit less ice time. He got that, and I think that was more suited to him. So I think like that's the good side of it, but just his underlying numbers were still pretty trash. And
Okay,
you
before
look
you get
at
into the numbers, there was one other thing though that popped in my head. He does an extra thing with the puck all the time that sometimes he'll turn the wrong way and everybody gets crazy because he'll have a turnover. Torts may be able to take that out of him by just saying,
Mhm.
you're going to have the puck less. Like, that's it. You're going to have the puck for 2 seconds. If the puck's on your stick, it's off your stick. We don't want you really transporting the puck. And if they do that, maybe that cures that.
That's fair. And like I said, there are some good things about him, and I do think Torts can get more out of him. But just the numbers are very challenging to overcome with, his Corsi against per 60, 64.7. That's atrocious. 33 giveaways to 21 takeaways.
That's bad.
That's not a good ratio for a defenseman. I think,
Mm-mm.
you got to be on the upside of that as a defenseman, especially as a physical defenseman. You should be taking the puck away from the other team if that's your
Although
brand.
my devil's advocate argument on that was anybody a plus in giveaway takeaway as far as a regular? I know Noah Cates was, but as a regular, I'm not sure they had many, if any.
Well, you're probably right there. I don't know off the top of my
No, I know.
head.
I mean, I just remember looking at certain guys. That's not an excuse for him, but you still
Right.
are relying on your teammates a little bit.
Yeah, that is true. But again, if you're selling yourself as a really physical defenseman and you're hitting people and you're blocking shots, where are the takeaways to line up with all of that? They just weren't there to the degree that they needed to be from him. And so, and I think that one of the other things that was missing from his play is that, and to be fair to him, he was just not really given special teams time.
No.
And so I think that, to me, that's a giant question mark for him. He only had 1 point, which was an assist on the power play all season long. And I really think that there has to be a way to figure out if he can be useful in those situations this upcoming season.
Yeah, I kind of wonder. There's another thing that, again, I felt was an underlying issue with the team, and this is why I wish they had hired a guy to train them ahead of time instead of bringing them in just last couple days ago. And the issue is, I felt like the Flyers would get gassed in games. All of them. Except for maybe some of the young players in Provorov. Most of them were getting gassed. And I do kind of wonder, could Risto be in better condition? He could be one of those guys now that comes into camp and has been doing everything the same way since Buffalo. No changes, because, I'm going to say doubtful the Flyers changed any of his habits. And Tortorella instantly changes his habits. Like, wait a minute. You're going about this wrong. Maybe, and then the rest of the staff looks at him and says, yeah, you've got to, this is how we can get more out of you.
That is a really good point as well. And it does seem like with Risto, he has his own way of doing things. He's in his own lane. Like in
Yes.
some ways, it felt like this past season that he was playing on a different team than the Flyers, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Like
it does.
he just was doing his own thing out there sometimes. And I do think that he and Sanheim do make a good pairing. I think they balance each other well. They just need Risto to do more and better of what he needs to do in that balance, right?
Hey, just to show you one guy that completely has, been awful for giveaway takeaway. Provorov, 17 takeaways, 84 giveaways. That's the second most in his career.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
That's pretty bad.
But it wasn't like, I mean, it's bad and I'm not going to excuse it, but with Provi, it's not like that's something you expect a ton out of him, right? That's not his game as much as you would expect.
No, but the last 2 years it's gotten worse, right? So that's something
Right.
where I feel like the whole team has gotten worse with that. And that's why I felt like younger players who came in that weren't exposed to the team were better at it than some of the guys in the system already, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I do think that like it's going to be really important for Sanheim and Risto to build the right kind of chemistry.
Yeah.
That I think we saw hints of it, that it's a doable pair, but it wasn't there all the time. And I think Risto was definitely more of the weak link, right? Travis Sanheim was one of the bright
Oh, yeah.
spots for the Flyers all season. So, and I do think with Sanheim being in a contract year, that's going to elevate his play a little
It
bit,
should.
and Risto's going to have to keep up.
Look, I mean, the irony here is, I don't remember the name of the movie. It was by the Coen brothers, but remember those two guys were tied together, breaking out of jail. They had like a leg clamp on them, and they couldn't get it out, right? That's how these two are this year. Sanheim's next contract is dependent on Ristolainen.
Yeah, it's really true, and I just hope that they can figure out a way to make all of that work to their advantage for
I'm
both
going to
of
stay
them,
on
right?
the positive side for that, because I did feel like they were the best pairing last year. I feel like they'll be the best pairing this year. So I'm going to stay on the positive side of it. Even if you want to tell me Ristolainen's overpaid, I'm going to be like, how much? Really, by how much? Because again, what does $4 million get you if you say he's only worth $4 million? What does $4 million get you in this league on the blue line anymore?
Not much. I think, that's the lower end of a second pairing defenseman. So could
Yeah.
you make that argument with Risto based on performance? Maybe. But in terms of like your average second pairing defenseman, I think $5 million is about where you're going to pay.
Yeah, I mean, Scott
And
Mayfield's
we
on a
just need,
ridiculous on a
yeah.
ridiculous deal, so he'll get more money. Adam Pelech was on a ridiculous deal, and then he got a raise, right? He's not very offensive. And this is the higher end of, those kinds of defensemen, and Pelech's actually a top liner, right? So, but just top pairing guy. But it's just to show you that there's not a ton of these guys, and there's definitely not a ton that make less money.
No, that is absolutely true. Well, I think the conclusion we have come to is that Risto needs to step up a little bit. The
He does.
pairing has to really have a gangbusters year for this team to improve things on the defensive side of things. And we think Tortorella could have a positive effect there.
Well, maybe over the summer, we don't know. Maybe, Yoni Peekinen called him up and they went to an Anthrax concert together or something and buddied up.
All right.
Who knows?
Well, we will be back up next with our nemesis of the week. All right, Russ, it's Monday. It's time for our nemesis of the week. And if you are newer to Locked On Flyers, every Monday we look at the week upcoming and say who or what in Flyers land or the world of hockey is just irritating us, or things that we're worried about going into the week with all of that. And last week we talked about being a little nervous with Tortorella that he might box some of the younger kids out of development opportunities at the NHL level. Certainly could happen to Wade Allison, could happen to Linus Hogberg, that we talked about at the top of the show. And this week, for me, my nemesis is that this upcoming weekend, it's going to be September, which is absolutely bonkers to me that the summer is coming to an end. And, I'm excited for summer being over just because I like colder weather in general. So that'll be a good thing. But there is a certain sort of sadness to the summer being over. But I'm trying to balance that out with excitement because we're going to get the Flyers back. We're going to get the NHL back. And I'm very excited about that. And so it's sort of this mix of sad the summer's over, but happy hockey is closer to being back.
So my nemesis this week is going to be Gritty.
Oh, no. What did Gritty do?
He didn't do anything. This is more the Flyers' fault. But I feel like as we get closer to the season, I want less Gritty on social media and talking points and everything and memes. And I want more about the younger players, because I feel like you have to sell Flyers fans hope, even if you're not talking about the rebuild. I feel like if you have built this team to be like 25 and under, and that's what your model is, then start pushing that now. Like, I feel like that's what you need to do and sell that hope. Don't sell me skits with Gritty, because at the end of the day, that's not much to hold on to if things start going bad. But if things start going bad in the regular season, I can still hold on to the young players with the hope that, hey, things are going to get better maybe at the end of this year, maybe into next year. That's what I'm saying. So a little less Gritty.
I think it's fair to say that when we talked about it last season, that just all during the season, they did not do a good job of highlighting prospects,
A bad
showing
job
highlights
until the end of the year. Then they finally started showing Bobby Brink.
Yeah, it's like they didn't show highlights from NCAA prospects.
No.
They didn't really say, "Oh, keeping track with our prospects with the Phantoms." Like they just didn't do any of that. And I think, this week's Nemesis is all about balance, right? So
Yes.
there is a balance to it where I think there is a certain degree of fun you have with your team mascot, but you also have to balance it with other kinds of content. And I think that's a fair point. I do want to actually talk about a Gritty update from Friday's show.
Okay.
Which you reminded me with talking about Gritty. So we talked about a post that they did with clapping, and they said the caption was, "It's the clap," but they had deleted that post. And I think it was because of the controversial nature of saying, having the clap on there. So they reposted it later over, I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday, with the caption, "This is cinema," which I wouldn't expect you to get this, Russ, but it's a Harry Styles reference.
Oh, okay.
And so I appreciated that since I just saw Harry Styles in concert last week. But I think that
seems like a nice chap, just not in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's, it's totally fine. Everybody's got their thing.
Yep.
But I think it's very amusing that they reposted it with a different caption.
Yeah, that is funny. But again, people would have to really search the internet, younger people, to even know what it meant. I don't think people talk about that in that vernacular in this day and age. You don't hear that anymore.
Oh, the clap?
The clap. You don't hear it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think so. I thought you were talking about the Harry Styles reference.
No. Harry Styles, like, what was he in? I don't know, One Dimension? I don't know what the name of his band was. Did he leave it? Did he bail on them?
Oh my God, Russ.
Well, what are they?
What was it?
One Direction. It's close. It had one in it. But did he bail on them? Was he like every other lead singer that said, "I'm too popular," like Justin Timberlake, and just left?
They all
Why did they break up? Why'd they break up?
Because they were just done. They went through their cycle. They were together for quite a long time. I don't even honestly know that much about One Direction. I'm more of a Harry Styles fan than a One Direction fan. Okay. But they just kind of went their separate ways. They decided they need a break. And I think all of them have done solo projects. So
okay. All right.
I think it's just Harry Styles that became the most popular, I think. But anyway. There you go. There's your One Direction info on Locked On Flyers related to Gritty. That will, what a note to end today's show.
Unforeseen.
Yes, took a turn. All right, that will do it for today's show. We'll be back again on Wednesday. We're super excited. We're going to be talking to friend of the show, Joe Yurden, who has covered the Sabres and the NHL in general. Really excited to get sort of an outside perspective on the Flyers from a guy like him who's super knowledgeable.
He's watched a lot of Risto, so be prepared.
As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send us in mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. You can also comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily NHL podcast. Have a great day, everyone.